This is the lesson for August 11th through 17th and August 18th through 24th. Doctrine and Covenants sections 88 to 92. Today's topics are education and learning, all things for our good, Vienna Jaques, and the word of wisdom. My podcast hosting platform was having issues, so I'm trying out doing the podcast with an AI voice. Doctrine and Covenants section 88 is a big one. It has a lot about the temple. I have some things I'd like to say about the Kirtland Temple, but I will save it for later when we cover the dedication. Section 88 also kicks off the School of the Prophets, which is basically an invite-only men's study club that Joseph Smith formed. It completely excluded women and was just basically for Joseph Smith's inner circle. Today I want to talk about the Church's relationship with education and learning. I start with reading section 88 verses 118 and 119. And as all have not faith, seek ye diligently and teach one another words of wisdom. Yes, seek ye out of the best books words of wisdom. Seek learning, even by study and also by faith. Organize yourselves. Prepare every needful thing. And establish a house, even a house of prayer, a house of fasting, a house of faith, a house of learning, a house of glory, a house of order, a house of God. I like the admonition to seek learning from the best books. I think that's great. I also like the mention of a house of learning in verse 119. However, I feel tension in the church regarding education and learning. The leaders want the men in the church to get an education so they can have high earning and stable careers. They tell women that their responsibility is the home and children and they shouldn't pursue an education or career if it takes them away from their primary responsibility. The church always cautions against learning anything that could lead to less loyalty to the church. They label any academic material that doesn't paint the church in the best light as anti. Boyd K. Packer named intellectuals one of the three main threats to the church. We're told to study our scriptures, general conference talks, church magazines, the Come Follow Me manual, etc., etc. That really doesn't leave a lot of time to read anything for ourselves or for our education and learning. Basically, the church only supports education and learning that supports the church and discourages it if it doesn't. I think that's wrong. I graduated from BYU and it's weird there. There is a vibe that professors have to toe the line, and if there is any conflict between their discipline and the church, they have to support the church. It's like they have a fear that if they go too far with their teaching, they could lose their job. And it has happened there plenty. Another issue I think the church has with education is that as you learn more, some of the church's teachings look more rudimentary or even outright wrong. Quick example, the church teaches that people are male or female. But we know that there is more genetic variations than that. People are not only born with XX or XY chromosomes. About 1.7% of babies are born intersex. Most of the time it isn't identifiable at birth. That's only in 1 out of every 2,000 births. It often becomes evident at puberty. Anyway, that's a lot of people that we know exist that do not fit in with this basic church-created gender binary. When you're educated and know more, it's clear that church does not have all the answers and many of its answers are false. The church could adapt to greater knowledge and expand its teaching to be more inclusive. But it chooses not to. To change too much would diminish its one true church claim. My opinion is that the world is amazing. There's so much to learn and experience. We do ourselves a huge disservice if we don't regularly dedicate some time and energy into expanding our horizons. I don't have a lot of free time. I read the news, watch some documentaries, and I listen to audiobooks. That's about all I can do right now while raising young kids. But even with the little I do, I learn new things and new ways of looking at problems all the time. That's the beauty of education and learning. I just feel like the church wants to be seen as a proponent of education, but there are lots of areas where it's not. The church is a bit hypocritical on this topic. I'm going to save the word of wisdom for the end of this podcast and move to the next topic. The manual highlights section 90 verse 24. I'll read it and discuss. Search diligently, pray always, and be believing, and all things shall work together for your good. If ye walk uprightly and remember the covenant wherewith ye have covenanted one with another. I hate the idea that everything that happens is for our good. That is false. I have discussed this topic before in the March 11th, 2024 episode. It's worth going back and listening to that again. I don't want to repeat it. But I also didn't feel like this topic could come up again without addressing it. This is a false promise. You can be 100% faithful and bad things can and will still happen to you. There is no amount of dedication to a church or God or whatever that will guarantee peace, health, and safety. That's just not how the world works. And I really wish that religion specifically would stop making these kinds of false promises. There is so much good that could be cultivated without them. Why not focus on the real good that churches can do? Instead of promising that good will come to those that dedicate themselves to you. Just do good for the sake of doing good. I also need to mention Vienna Jaques. She is the only woman other than Emma Smith to be mentioned by name in the Doctrine and Covenants. It's pretty noteworthy. She is mentioned here because Joseph Smith was soliciting a large donation from her in order to build the Kirtland Temple. She was from Boston and fairly wealthy. She read the Book of Mormon and went to Kirtland and got baptized. She donated $1,400 to the church, and then she was told to go build up Zion in Missouri. She wasn't there long because of the acrimony toward the Mormons by the other inhabitants. She was also a witness to the first baptism of the dead. Joseph Smith heard about it after the fact and confirmed that the ordinance was right. I just need to note that a woman was the first witness because witnessing baptisms was taken away from women in the church for a long time before recently being reinstated by the church. She was a faithful member of the church for the rest of her life, arriving in Utah in October 1847. In my brief searching, I only found church resources for information about her life. I can't help but think that the reason her name is mentioned is because of her wealth. By Joseph Smith giving her some personal attention and recognition. I'm sure it made it easier to get that huge donation that Joseph Smith needed to buy the lot for the Kirtland Temple. But by all the accounts I read, Vienna seems like a good person. And now, probably because of the donation, and her name being mentioned, she is not lost to history. Section 89 is the word of wisdom. I like the word of wisdom. I feel like it kept me from some pitfalls with substance use. I just hate some of the way it's been applied in the church. Back when I was a missionary 25 years ago, we had a flip chart for the word of wisdom, and it just listed the don'ts. No alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, or illegal drugs. Times have changed a lot. Vaping didn't exist then. There's no tobacco in vaping, but it has numerous disastrous health consequences, including cancer. And marijuana use has been legalized in many states in many situations. Prescription drug misuse wasn't nearly as widespread then either. Now there is recreational and therapeutic use of drugs like ketamine and psilocybin too. The old list of don'ts doesn't work anymore. Which should highlight the real problem with boiling down the word of wisdom to a list of don'ts. I think the main principle of the word of wisdom is prioritizing health and moderation. A list of don'ts puts the focus off the main principle, and it gives us ammo to judge others. I want to run and not be weary. I want to be healthy. And I want to live a long life if I can. Because of that, I'm going to make mostly good choices. It kills me that right at the beginning it states that this is not a commandment. But the church has elevated it to a commandment by making following its list of don'ts part of the temple recommend interview. A good friend of mine passed away a few years ago. She was in her 70s. She was a convert to the church like 30 or 40 years prior. She was a smoker. She tried many times to kick the habit, but she couldn't. She really wanted to go to the temple, but she was never permitted because she was addicted to cigarettes. She was dedicated to the church and her ward. But I could see how people judged her. She asked to be buried in temple clothes. It meant that much to her. Only in death did the church allow her that religious right. I think it's wrong that she was excluded from the temple. She fulfilled all the rest of the recommend questions. She would have loved it. And I think it's wrong that someone who dedicated so much to the church was judged as unworthy by the church. I don't think Jesus would have viewed her that way. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Please share with family and friends. Until next time.